The anime begins with the protagonist completely disoriented, trying to understand where he was and mentally complaining about who might have turned off the light around him. Little by little, a small luminous crack appears before him, growing stronger and stronger until it allows him to see the surroundings more clearly. Thus, he realizes that he is in the middle of a forest. Without understanding how he ended up there, a status window appears in front of him, informing him that he is about to be born from a dragon egg. Soon after, a voice starts speaking to him, introducing itself as the divine voice of level 1. Confused by all of this, the protagonist tries to find out who he is talking to. But the entity replies that, since it is still only at level 1, it cannot reveal more information. Since he cannot stay still, the egg ends up falling from the top of a tree. The protagonist panics when he notices that his HP has decreased due to the fall. The divine voice then informs him that he has just acquired a new title, called Clumsy. Next, the egg begins to roll down a slope and only stops at the edge of a lake. At that moment, he manages to see his own reflection in the water and falls into despair upon confirming that he really has turned into an egg. The divine voice warns him that he still belongs to rank F and can easily die if his shell is broken, despite having the potential to become an extremely powerful dragon over time. In that state, he is seen only as food. Dragon eggs are considered a delicacy, and many adventurers often hunt them to eat. The situation is even more dangerous because he is not in a nest, protected by his parents. The protagonist tries to process all this information when, suddenly, he starts rolling downhill once again. As a result, his roll skill increases to level 2, allowing him to have some control over his direction while moving. When he finally stops, he realizes that only 3 HP points remain. Fearing that he might die at any moment, he decides to remain still until nightfall. During the rest, his HP is completely restored. After that, he decides to move forward, rolling through the forest. As he moves along, he begins to wonder whether he will one day truly become a powerful dragon. Imagining if he needs to grow stronger in the same way as in RPG games. Further ahead, he encounters a strange creature. By using analysis, he discovers that it is a dark worm, a monster that feeds on eggs. As soon as the creature notices him, it starts chasing him. The protagonist tries to flee as fast as possible, which in this case means rolling at full speed. He then considers the possibility of fighting, but realizes that the worm has more HP than he does. Facing it directly would be practically suicide, since the risk of being devoured is enormous. Thinking calmly, the protagonist devises a plan. He lures the monster to the edge of a cliff and, at the right moment, causes the worm to fall, defeating it without the need for brute force. To him, this proves that a good strategy can be more effective than pure power. After the victory, the divine voice informs him that he has received 12 experience points. In addition, thanks to the title Walking Egg, he gains 12 extra points. The protagonist finds it curious to realize that he is truly accumulating experience like in a game. The voice continues, explaining that he has now reached level 5, the maximum level possible for an egg, with all conditions met. The system presents 2 evolution options, hatchling dragon and small dragon. The small dragon is a dwarf race among dragons, but even so, when fully grown, its size surpasses that of a bear. It is feared by adventurers due to its powerful fire breath. The hatchling dragon, on the other hand, is not suitable for combat, as it has short claws and fangs. Its meat, however, is extremely tender and highly appreciated when prepared with sauce. Despite these disadvantages, this form has enormous evolutionary potential, being able to transform into various dragon species in the future. Even so, the hatchling dragon is constantly hunted by both adventurers and other monsters. While the protagonist considers that the small dragon seems to be the safer choice, a mysterious hand appears and envelops him, wishing for him to grow strong and stating that its goal is to reach the top. The presence also asks him not to disappoint its expectations. At that moment, the divine voice evolves to level 2. The protagonist believes that those hands belong to the divine voice itself, and that they only appeared now because he reached this new level. He reflects once again on which path to follow. It was said that the hatchling dragon has much greater evolutionary potential, which indicates that the small dragon might not evolve as much, or might not evolve any further at all. For that reason, even aware of the risks and disadvantages, he decides to choose the hatchling dragon. With the evolution completed, thanks to the level 1 title, Son of the Dragon King, all of his resistance skills that were at level 5 or below are enhanced. In this new form, he learns several skills, such as Dragon Scales, Baby Breath, Whistle, and Bite. However, he notices that his HP does not fully recover simply from evolving. Approaching the body of the defeated Dark Worm, he mentally expresses his gratitude, acknowledging that he only managed to evolve because of that creature. At that moment, something strange happens. Just by looking at the monster, he feels an intense hunger. Even though he finds the idea unpleasant, his draconic instincts tell him that he needs to feed. The divine voice confirms that eating is necessary to recover. Reluctant but with no alternative, the protagonist begins to devour the dark worm, feeling disgust throughout the entire process. After a night of deep sleep, he awakens completely recovered. Still without understanding how, he concludes that he reincarnated into a world that closely resembles an RPG game. Even so, his mind remains confused, as he cannot remember who he was before arriving there. He is almost certain that he was human, although he does not even know what his gender was. Suddenly, several dark worms appear around him. This time, however, he decides to face them. Hunting them one by one, he gains experience, improves his mastery of Dragon Breath, and quickly rises to level 7, which unlocks the Dragon Punch skill. When he finishes defeating all the enemies, he realizes that he has already reached level 15. Faced with this, the protagonist begins to believe that reaching the top of this world might be easier than he had imagined. At that moment, the protagonist's stomach starts rumbling again, making it clear that he is hungry once more. He feels frustrated at the thought that he might have to eat worms again. Looking around more carefully, he notices some mushrooms growing nearby and decides to take a risk, choosing to eat them instead of insects. After the improvised meal, he drinks some water and comes to the conclusion that he should never again consume mushrooms found randomly in the forest, as that choice almost cost him his life. Despite the danger, this experience ends up granting him a new skill, poison resistance. Continuing on his path through the forest, he begins to reflect that he needs to find different prey, as he does not want to spend the rest of his life feeding only on insects. It does not take long before he spots a gray wolf ahead. As soon as the animal enters his field of vision, the protagonist begins to chase it. Shortly after, he manages to defeat the wolf using Dragon Punch. Unlike previous times, he decides to use his flames to prepare the meat, making a kind of grilled dish. Upon tasting it, he realizes that the flavor is much better than that of the dark worms, which leaves him quite satisfied. Later, he faces and defeats another gray wolf, causing his level to increase to 20. Soon after, he is informed that his next evolution will only occur upon reaching level 25. Even though he is relatively close to that goal, he notices that leveling up is becoming increasingly difficult. Suddenly, strange sounds catch his attention. He begins to hear voices, although he cannot understand what is being said. Even so, he recognizes that they are human voices. Approaching cautiously, he notices that these people are wearing armor, which confirms to him that this truly is a fantasy world. By analyzing the group's statistics, he notes that none of them surpass him. Even though he is not human, he tries to approach them with the intention of making friends, but ends up being attacked by an adventurer without any warning. The protagonist cannot understand the reason for the attack, as he showed no hostility and posed no danger to them. Shortly afterward, he is struck by a spell cast by the adventurers. As a result, he ends up acquiring the magic resistance skill. Trying to escape, he realizes that his body is extremely weakened. As the adventurers draw closer, he concludes that he was naive to believe that humans and dragons could coexist peacefully. Even so, he tries to flee with all his strength, as he does not want to die so soon after reincarnating in that world. However, his weak body barely responds. At the moment when one of the adventurers prepares to deliver the final blow, a girl steps in front of him, stopping the attack. Although the protagonist still cannot understand the words exchanged between them, he clearly perceives that the girl is trying to protect him. She approaches and begins to cast healing magic on him. The protagonist is moved when he realizes that, even though he is of a different race, she is making an effort to save him. By observing the statistics, he discovers that her name is Myria Melania. Even with her MP nearly depleted, she continues to spend energy to heal him. Gradually, he begins to understand what she is saying, realizing that the paralysis affecting him is almost gone. At that moment, he acquires the Greek language skill. Suddenly, an extremely oppressive presence fills the surroundings. He hears screams coming from the direction where the other adventurers were. The protagonist understands that there must be a very powerful monster nearby and believes that those humans have probably already been defeated. Myria tries to run to help her companions, but the protagonist attempts to stop her, as he knows she would have no chance against something so strong. Even so, the girl says goodbye and runs toward the danger. Determined to help her friends, he tries to follow her, but his body is still partially paralyzed. As soon as he regains his movement, he runs in the direction of the screams. Upon arriving at the location, he is confronted by a small stone dragon, rank C, level 197. His eyes immediately turn to Myria, who is lying unconscious on the ground. He feels the urge to help her, but ends up frozen in fear as he faces that imposing creature. The stone dragon tries to bite him, but the protagonist manages to escape by a narrow margin. In that instant, he understands that he made a grave mistake. A deep sense of regret arises for not having joined Myria's group, as he believes that if the four of them had fought together, they might have had some chance against that creature. Now, completely alone, he is not sure if he will even manage to leave that place alive, let alone defeat the rock dragon. Hidden among the bushes, he looks around and notices Myria lying on the ground, unconscious, with only 6 hit points remaining. Even in the face of the critical situation, he feels a slight sense of relief upon realizing that she is still breathing. Unable to locate the protagonist, the rock dragon shifts its focus and begins to approach Myria. Seeing this, the protagonist starts questioning what his next action should be. If he did nothing, she would likely be devoured by the monster. However, before he can act, a divine voice echoes in his mind, interrupting his thoughts. The voice orders him to flee immediately, warning that if he remains there, he will end up dying. Even so, he remembers that Myria had reached out to help him before, and decides that he could not simply abandon her. Firm in his decision, he lets out a loud roar to draw the creature's attention and charges straight at it. The dragon tries to crush him with a violent stomp, but he manages to evade it, and the system recognizes his feat, granting him the title of King of Evasion. Observing the battlefield, he realizes that the old man from Myria's group has his HP reduced to 0. When checking the other companion, he notices that he still shows signs of life. Desperate, the protagonist tries to think of any way to save Myria and the survivor. He begins to provoke the rock dragon, striking it repeatedly to make it chase him. However, this decision ends up proving to be a mistake, as the monster uses an earth-based ability that hits him directly. As the dragon draws closer, the protagonist realizes that the enemy is about to use a biting attack. Anticipating the move, he reacts strategically and counterattacks with the so-called dragon punch. Even so, the creature somehow survives and immediately enters a recovery state to restore its HP. Taking advantage of this brief opening, the protagonist runs to Myria, places her on his back, and flees the area, leaving the other member of the group behind, as he has neither the time nor the strength to save anyone else. After moving away from the battlefield, he realizes that Myria's HP continues to decrease, which makes him think this may be happening due to blood loss. Trying to help her, he makes an effort to use healing magic, but he is unable to activate that type of spell. At that moment, he senses a faint smell of humans in the air and decides to follow that direction, believing that only people would be capable of saving Myria's life. Guided by this weak trail, he moves forward through the forest. However, along the way, a horde of gray wolves begins to pursue him. Even exhausted, the protagonist faces the beasts with everything he has to protect Myria. At the end of the confrontation, he is completely out of energy, but even so, he forces himself to keep walking. Carrying Myria, he continues on until he finally reaches a village. Seeing no one around, he lets out a loud roar, hoping to draw attention. Several humans appear in response, but upon seeing the scene, they immediately conclude that the protagonist is a beast trying to harm Myria. With no way to communicate between them, the humans begin to attack him. Realizing that there was no way for a dragon to make them believe he was not a threat, he carefully places Myria on the ground and flees from there. The system then grants him a new title, called Little Hero. A few days later, Myria awakens after receiving proper treatment and finds herself inside Marielle's house. The elf explains that she had to use powerful white magic to save her life. She comments that, by all indications, Myria has already recovered from most of her injuries and asks the girl to rest a little longer. Myria agrees, but begins to wonder silently who had brought her back to the village. Marielle shows irritation as she comments that she had warned Dawes several times not to get into trouble. Myria asks where Mr. Dawes and Mr. Grants are. With a heavy expression, Marielle reveals that Grants is dead, as his body was found by the villagers in the forest the day before. Visibly shaken, she calls Dawes a fool for having faced a stone dragon. When Myria asks about Dawes' whereabouts, Marielle replies that his body has not yet been located, but she believes he was devoured. Upon realizing that she was the only survivor, Myria is overcome by an intense feeling of guilt and begins to regret not having stopped Dawes from challenging the stone dragon. Tears begin to fall, and Marielle consoles her, stating that it was not her fault. Myria remembers that Dawes was a great inspiration to the children of the village, always hunting the monsters that approached the area. She also recalls the day she saw him arguing with another man at the bar. The argument began when the man claimed that Dawes would never be able to defeat a stone dragon. He spoke with such conviction because he knew that, in a previous encounter with that type of monster, Dawes had felt fear and retreated. Even so, Dawes insisted that that was part of the past and declared that if he had a reason to fight a stone dragon at that moment, he would certainly win. The men present at the bar were certain that he would not succeed. Pride ended up pushing Dawes to try to prove otherwise, and that was how he decided to face a stone dragon. As a result, he sought out Myria to accompany him. Upon hearing what the mission would be, she questioned why he had not asked Marielle to go along. Since her healing magic was far more advanced, Dawes replied that he had spoken with Marielle, but that she was busy at that moment and, because of that, recommended that Myria accompany them. The girl reminded him that the stone dragon was the strongest monster in that region and that Marielle had made it clear that, under no circumstances, should they face one. Dawes asked if she was doubting him and stated that Grants had been present when Marielle gave permission. Grants, in an embarrassed manner, confirmed that this was true. He further added that Myria knew how dangerous stone dragons were, and that, if it were not with them, one of the two might end up dying. Reluctantly, she agreed to accompany them, imposing the condition that if the situation became too dangerous, they would retreat immediately. After hearing the whole story, Marielle states that it was Dawes' pride that led him to his death and reinforces that Myria bears no guilt whatsoever. She advises her to be careful not to make the same mistake in the future and comments that it is impressive that the girl managed to survive even with such severe injuries. Myria then says that someone carried her to the village. Confused, Marielle asks what she is talking about, explaining that Myria was found being attacked by a monster in the surroundings of the village. Myria states that she lost consciousness during the stone dragon's attack and that there was no way she could have returned on her own. Marielle replies that no one from the village would risk walking through the forest at night and reaffirms that Myria was found being attacked by a monster, which Gregory managed to drive away to save her. She explains that humans can lose part of their memory after suffering a very strong shock, and that this was probably happening to her. Even so, Myria has a vague memory of the protagonist fighting to protect her. Because of that, she asks Marielle to describe the monster that was attacking her at that moment. Marielle replies that the creature had already fled when she arrived at the scene. With that, Myria begins to question internally whether it had been that dragon who saved her. The next morning, the protagonist awakens after a prolonged rest. As soon as he opens his eyes, he realizes that all his injuries have disappeared. He knows that rest accelerates his recovery. But even so, he finds it hard to believe that so many wounds were healed in such a short time. His thoughts soon turn to Myria, and he wonders whether she would also already be out of danger. In silence, he recalls everything that happened over the last few days. Even though he had evolved and believed he had become stronger, the feeling of helplessness before the stone dragon still remains vivid. This memory leads him to a clear conclusion. He needs to become much stronger. The scene then shifts to the protagonist facing several shadow worms. During the fight, he comments that he tied one of them to a tree, using the trapped worm as bait to attract the others. Thanks to this strategy, he ends up receiving the title of offender from the system. He feels no pride whatsoever in this method and decides that he will not use it again after this. Even so, he acknowledges that, at that moment, he needed experience to reach the next stage of evolution. Continuing to hunt and fight, he accumulates experience until he finally reaches level 25, at which point he becomes eligible to evolve. The divine voice then asks whether he wishes to view the evolution tree, and he responds positively. This time, 5 options appear before him: young plague dragon, infant marble dragon, dragonling, mini angel dragon, and mini dragon. As he looks at the options, he wonders what the difference is between mini dragon, small dragon, and baby dragon. The divine voice explains that the term small does not refer to an evolutionary stage, but rather to the size limitations of a given species. Species classified as small have faster attribute growth, but have fewer evolutionary paths and fewer abilities when compared to baby-type species. Even so, many of their future evolutions carry high potential. Next, the voice explains that mini-types have even fewer evolution options, but have the advantage of a more stable evolutionary tree. Even with the explanation, the protagonist remains confused and realizes that he cannot make a decision without better understanding each choice. Faced with this, the divine voice begins to detail the options. First, it explains about the mini dragon, which has the same reduced size as the small dragon. However, its individual growth is slow and its evolutionary options are limited. In compensation, several of its future evolutions present great potential. This description does not please him, as he does not like the idea of slow growth nor restricted evolutionary paths. The next option is the mini angel dragon, a dragon that awakened the so-called protective spirit and swore to live for the sake of others. As a consequence, it can use white magic, but its direct combat capability is low. This limitation bothers him, as he does not like the idea of not having adequate abilities to fight. He even thinks about white magic, remembering Myria and how she used it. But that is not enough to convince him to choose this form. The divine voice then goes on to explain about the dragonling. This is the natural form that comes after the baby dragon stage. Although it is not yet fully mature, its physical capabilities have increased significantly compared to the previous form. Soon after, the infant marble dragon is presented, a form that went through a mutation. This evolution grants the dragon magical capacity superior to that of a common dragon. Finally, the divine voice speaks about the young plague dragon. This form represents the first stage of a malevolent dragon, known for spreading disasters wherever it goes. Even so, the voice emphasizes that he has not completely strayed from the correct path and that it would still be possible to return. The idea of causing destruction does not please the protagonist at all, and for that reason he rejects this option without hesitation. The system continues describing the characteristics of this type of dragon, mentioning, among other things, that it possesses high intelligence and the ability to use human transformation. The protagonist reacts immediately, stating out loud that he does not wish to become malevolent. However, upon reflecting more carefully on what he has just heard, he ends up becoming especially interested in the possibility of transforming into a human. And thus we end the second episode of the anime, Reincarnated as a Dragon Hatchling. If you want the continuation of the next episodes, leave it there in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep catching the upcoming videos. Take care and see you next time.